Once upon a time, in the bustling city of Metroville, there was a man named Richard Steele. Tall, imposing, and sharp-minded, Richard was the CEO of Steele Corp, a multinational conglomerate known for its ruthless efficiency. However, behind closed doors, Richard was infamous for his love of firing employees. It was a sunny Monday morning when our story begins. Richard strode into the sleek, glass-walled offices of Steele Corp, a sense of power emanating from his every step. His loyal assistant, Sarah, always working on clutching a stack of papers. "Good morning, Mr. Steele," Sarah said with a forced smile. She had learned to mask her anxiety around him, knowing how unpredictable Richard could be. "Morning, Sarah," Richard grunted, barely sparing her a glance. He headed straight for his corner office, where a line of employees awaited their fate. One by one, Richard summoned them in, his face impassive as he delivered the dreaded news. "I'm sorry, but we no longer require your services," he would say, watching with detached interest as they gathered their belongings and left, their dreams shattered. Hours passed, and the once bustling office grew eerily quiet as word of Richard's latest round of firings spread like wildfire. Some employees whispered in hushed tones, while others avoided eye contact, fearing they might be next. As the day wore on, Richard's heart grew heavier with each dismissal. Despite his outward bravado, a nagging feeling of guilt gnawed at him. He couldn't shake the image of the disappointed faces of those he had let go. Finally, as the clock struck noon, Richard called for Sarah. "Cancel all my appointments for the rest of the day," he instructed her, surprising even himself with the sudden decision. Sarah raised an eyebrow but nodded, accustomed to her boss's abrupt changes in plans. She watched as Richard disappeared into his office, the door closing behind him with a soft click. Alone in his spacious office, Richard sank into his leather chair, the weight of his actions crashing down on him. He stared out at the city skyline, the once familiar view now seeming foreign and cold. Memories flooded his mind, the enthusiastic young intern he had dismissed earlier, the single mother struggling to make ends meet, the elderly employee who had devoted decades to the company. With a heavy sigh, Richard reached for his phone and dialed a number he hadn't called in years. It rang twice before a familiar voice answered. "Hi. Is everything okay?" The voice belonged to his estranged ex-wife, Emily. Tears welled up in Richard's eyes as he spoke, his voice cracking with emotion. "Emily, it's me. I need to talk to you." Half an hour later, Emily arrived at Steele Corp, her eyes widening in surprise at the sight of her father's office. Richard stood up, his face pale but determined. "Emily, I've made a terrible mistake," he began, his voice trembling. "I've been so focused on profits and efficiency that I forgot about the people who make this company what it is." Emily listened in stunned silence as Richard poured out his heart, recounting the events of the day and the deep regret he felt for his actions. Together, they both worked late into the night, drafting a plan to rehire the employees Richard had let go. They vowed to create a more compassionate workplace, where employees were valued and supported. Days turned into weeks, and word of Steele Corp's transformation spread like wildfire. Morale soared, productivity increased, and the once dreaded CEO became known for his newfound empathy and humility. And so, Richard Steele learned a valuable lesson that day, that true strength lies not in wielding power over others, but in lifting them up and standing by their side. As for Steele Corp, it flourished under its new ethos of compassion and understanding, becoming not just a successful corporation, but a beacon of hope in the business world. And Richard? Well, he discovered that the greatest satisfaction came not from firing employees, but from seeing them thrive and succeed under his guidance. From that day forward, He vowed to always lead with his heart, knowing that true success is measured not in profits alone, but in the lives touched and the hearts uplifted along the way. And so, in the heart of Metroville, a new era dawned for Steel Corp, guided by the wisdom of a CEO, who had learned that sometimes, the greatest growth comes from the deepest regrets. By the soft glow of city lights, Emily spoke softly, her voice filled with sincerity. I'm proud of you. What you're doing for the company, for the employees. It's incredible. Richard looked at his ex-wife, his eyes shimmering with unshed tears. Thank you, Emily. I couldn't have done it without you. A comfortable silence settled between them, the weight of the past slowly lifting. It was then that Emily cleared her throat, a hint of hesitation in her voice. There's something I've been meaning to talk to you about, she began, her gaze fixed on her hands clasped tightly in her lap. Richard leaned forward, concern etched on his face. What is it, sweetheart? You can tell me anything. Taking a deep breath, Emily looked up. I missed us, Emily, Richard said, his voice filled with emotion. I know I can't change the past, but I want to try to make things right. I want us to try again, to rebuild our family. Margaret looked at Richard, her eyes shining with tears. Richard. I've missed you, too. I've missed us. With trembling hands, Richard reached out, taking Margaret's hands in his own. Will you give me another chance, Margaret? Will you give us another chance? And in that moment, surrounded by the twinkling lights of the city below, Richard and Margaret found their way back to each other. From that day forward, Richard approached life with a newfound sense of humility and gratitude. Steel Corp continued to thrive under his leadership, but now with a focus on compassion and empathy. And as for Richard and Margaret, they worked tirelessly to rebuild their relationship, learning from their past mistakes and cherishing each moment together. As they sat hand in hand in the house of Richard's house, having fun together, Richard knew that he had been given a second chance at love and family. And he vowed to never take it for granted again. And so, in the heart of Metroville, a new chapter began for the Steel family, guided by the wisdom of a CEO, who had learned that true success is not measured in profits alone, but in the love and connections we share with others. And as Richard looked out at the city below, he knew that he had finally found what he had been searching for all along, a sense of purpose, a renewed love, and a family reunited, and would do anything not to lose this again. Despite his meteoric rise to success, Richard remained grounded, never forgetting the values of hard work and perseverance that had brought him this far. He became known not only for his business acumen, but also for his generosity, using his wealth to support charitable causes and uplift those in need.